Welcome to the Effective Lawyer Podcast. I'm Kevin Tully, the Chief Marketing Officer at Zinda Law Group. With me, as always, is our lead trial lawyer and CEO, Jack Zinda. And today we're going to be talking about how not to get ripped off by vendors. Jack, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. I love this topic because it's happened to me so many times that I can literally explain every situation you should not do.
Awesome. So we're looking forward to hearing your experiences. Tell me a little bit about it. Where do you want to kick off?
Well, I want to kind of go back to the beginning when I first opened my practice. I had a lot of needs, whether it was, how do I get money to run the practice? How do I get cases? How do I hire people? How do I fire people? And a lot of things I didn't have expertise in. So I looked to hire vendors to help me solve those problems. And as lawyers, the old saying is, if you can't find the sucker in the room, it's probably you. And I think that applies to lawyers a lot of times. And in fact, we're the worst of all areas in that, because we think we're really smart, and we are, and we're expertise in this one area, and we think that makes us experts in everything else. And a lot of companies and vendors take advantage of that arrogance to put us in bad situations where they essentially rip you off and you don't get what you paid for. So that was my first experience in marketing, in finance, and in HR. And then it kind of grew from there. And I made just about every mistake you can imagine.
Yeah, if your inbox looks anything like mine does, there's no shortage of marketing vendors out there contacting law firms frequently. What are some of the pitfalls? What do you look out for?
I think the first thing you have to figure out is, what is your need? And is it a core need that you need help with? So for example, if I need more cases, how do I need to try to go about getting those? And then, do I have the internal expertise to do it, or do I not have the internal expertise to do it? So that's step one. What do I actually need from this person? And am I doing it based on an advertisement I saw, or actually something that I need as an organization? The second thing is understanding what is the type of vendor you want to work with. Do you need someone who's a large company that has lots of resources? Are you looking for a specialist who's really niche? Are you looking for something in between? And again, think about it like an interview process. So just using the example of marketing, for example, because that's the one we all get up with every day, right? Just like you were saying, Kevin, I probably have 300 emails between when we started the podcast and right now promising me all the cases I want for a really low cost. And so search engine optimization is an area that you get hit up. I'm sure you do. I do all the time. Well, first off, what's the objective of search engine optimization, right? Well, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. I look at all marketing as trying to get me clients. So the question I ask, how will this get me clients? What an SEO company may want you to focus on is, how does this get you to rank higher? You don't care about rankings as a lawyer. And that's the first mistake people make. They focus on what the vendor wants them to focus on versus what the actual outcome is. And that's important because how do you know what you're paying for, right? If I go buy a car, I'm trying to buy a mode of transportation, so know what you're trying to actually buy. And so SEO pops up in that area a lot.
You talked a little bit about small versus large. There's such a difference between working with a group that's a large organization that has multiple layers of communication and people involved, red tape on their end and all the rest, versus dealing with an individual who can be more flexible but more limited in resources. And if they go on vacation, then nothing's happening, right? Do you have a preference between those two, or when do you think of using them differently?
I think a lot of it comes down to the resources you need. So for example, if I need some real technical expertise, let's say I need someone to help out on a website design and it's something visual I need, I'm going to try to find someone who's smaller, who's really good at that craft, especially if it's a one-off project. Versus if I go to an agency, you have to understand, when you go to a large organization, there's a lot of people that have to get paid. So a lot of times if you're dealing with like a marketing agency, you're going to have what's called an account manager. And that account manager is getting paid to take care of you. They're not actually doing the work. Other people are doing the work. And so you have to understand that there's going to be layers of cost associated with that. So a lot of times if it is really important to brand or messaging, or it's really unique and has a high level of expertise, I'm going to want a smaller group that has expertise in that area. Now, it may be a little more expensive than the bigger group, but a lot of times you're going to be dealing with the person actually doing the work, and you're going to get the most out of it. And examples that I can give are, with marketing, for example, if you're doing like AdWords, or if you're doing graphic design work or areas like that. And if you're thinking about like a lawyer, for example, if you have a trucking case, you're going to hire an accident reconstructionist that has experience in trucking cases and not just go hire a group that knows about accidents.
Another distinction is consultants versus vendors, right? So we're talking about vendors kind of with an umbrella to it. Are there different things to look out for when working with consulting groups versus vendors who are kind of more in the weeds doing the day-to-day work?
100%. So a vendor to me is someone I'm going to hire to do a specific job. A consultant is going to give me advice on something. And one of the red flags is if they can't articulate how they're actually going to help you get the result. If it's just some ambiguous, we're going to somehow help you achieve some grand thing, but it's not specific, run the other way. I always get back to, when you're dealing with anybody, what's the expectation of the relationship? What do you want the outcome to be? And if someone who's a consultant can't articulate that, then they're not going to be able to help you achieve that outcome. A lot of times consultants can be great because they are an independent person in the room who can give you advice. They have no dog in the fight. So if I need a marketing consultant, they can help me evaluate the vendors I'm looking at. If I need a financial consultant, they can help me raise money for a business or for the law firm. And they're not actually the ones getting paid by the people that are doing the service. So I think that's one area that's really helpful. One question that I get a lot is, how do I evaluate a marketing company or a financial company or any of these vendors that you're looking at, even a court reporting service? And I think you want to first think about it just like a job interview. Number one, decide what you want. So what's your outcome? Number two, what are the qualifications that you want from these people? Number three, talk to multiple vendors. I think that's like the biggest thing, is don't just take the first person that sent you an email or gave you a call. Talk to multiple folks. Then have them paint a picture for what it is you're actually going to have them do and what the outcome is going to be. Now, obviously, if it's a small task, small project, you don't have to put a lot of time into this. But if you're doing something like a search engine optimization contract, or you're going to go to a new bank, or you need to borrow a bunch of money, you want to hit the pause button and do things in a really methodical way so you don't make a mistake. And take it from me, like when I first started my practice, I hired a lot of charlatans, and it cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars and a lot of heartache to figure that out. So the third thing is, once you've talked to them, got a vision, get references. If they cannot give you references in the same or similar industry, run the other way. A lot of times I like to hire companies outside of legal, because when vendors see us, marketing agencies, they see a giant dollar sign. They're like, oh, I can triple mark this because this lawyer will pay me whatever it takes because, quote, these cases are so valuable. So I like to find people that are in adjacent industries, maybe medical, maybe financial services, because it's a similar type of approach to whatever you're doing, but they're not going to mark it up 10 times just because you are a law firm. But talk to references and actually talk to them, especially if it's a big contract you're about to give up, and ask them to explain how they helped them. We had a situation where we hired a company to create some custom software for us, and they gave us the references, and we talked to the references, and the references said they sucked. I was like, wow, that is a gutsy play. Like, you gave me your three best,
right?
And they don't even like you.
None of them were good.
Yeah. So actually talk to them is another thing that I think is really important.
Awesome. So we've got identifying the need. And if anybody's struggling to identify what their firm needs, go see our podcast about data analytics. That'll tell you pretty quickly where your needs are. We've got evaluating the vendors, those best practices with interviews and references. One of the things I've seen you do is, and I can imagine this being a situation that a lot of people experience, where I'm super busy. I need help from a vendor. I don't have time to go find the vendor. You have I think a good strategy of offloading that work to somebody else at your firm to bring you the top three vendors with pricing, right? And never without the pricing component. You want to talk about that a little bit?
I think that's a great point. I mean, you just nailed it right on the head. A lot of times they want to get to the decision maker. I call them time vampires. And if you have your own business or you're a lawyer, you know that your life is surrounded by time vampires. People that want to take you to quote lunch, take you to coffee, have a Zoom meeting to try to pitch you on whatever they have. So I have a policy where I'll have either an assistant, and it could be your office manager, go talk to the people I'm considering and say, you will not get a meeting with this person unless you give a range of pricing. And we have a hard and fast rule on that, and that prevents them from getting around them, talking to you for an hour and a half to then tell you the price, and maybe you don't want to pay the price. And I've used that as a lot of success because a lot of the reasons you make bad decisions is fatigue. You're just worn down. You really need that marketing agency, and you got to make a decision. So you just go with the first one that sent you the proposal over.
Yeah. Let's talk about pricing for a second. Are you often trying to negotiate rates with vendors? Are you taking them for their word that that's the value they're going to provide and trying to kick off the relationship without having to have that hard discussion up front? Where do you fall on that?
That's a great question. I don't look at things in terms of cost. I look at it in terms of value. So if I could pay someone $10,000 and they could get me 100 cases, or I could pay someone $1,000 and they get me no cases, obviously one's a better investment than the other. And I want to know what the marketplace is for the services that are being provided. I learned the hard way that if you go too cheap, you get what you pay for. And it's almost better not to do it at all. I mean, I'm thinking of so many examples where I hired someone to help me, a recruiter who was like the cheap one, who didn't find me anybody or found me bad people. And then I hired the quote expensive one, and they found people in a tenth of the time. They were great hires. I had to do almost none of the work. And I was like, very happy to pay the money to the folks.
Yeah.
Now, as a reminder, most of the listeners to this, you are lawyers. So you're not going to be good at this naturally. So make sure that you follow these steps, because if you just hire the most expensive, you may not be getting value. And they kind of prey on that. And also I look at how many people are in a meeting. I mean, Kevin and I had a meeting a while ago where 7 people showed up to pitch us on something. And I was like, this is not going to work. This is a lot of people they're paying just to be here to tell me these things. They could have been done in an email. I was like, this is going to be expensive. I was just waiting for the sticker shock.
All right. So after the evaluation phase, talk to me about kind of kicking off relationships, setting expectations, that sort of thing.
Everything in every relationship of life is about expectations. When a client hires you, you have an initial consultation meeting where you explain how the case is going to go and what you think you can achieve for them. It's the same relationship with the vendor. You want to make sure, okay, what are you promised me that you're going to get me? How long will it take to achieve these results? And how often are we going to touch base? And how am I going to hold you accountable? I'm going to use the example as SEO just because that's the easiest that people get hit up on those a lot. So if you met with an SEO vendor, you'd say, okay, I need to get this many cases from how much money I'm paying you. It's important. Back to that idea. What do you care about? You do not care about rankings. You care about cases. If they are reputable, they will get it. If they're not, they're going to try to talk about something else, confuse you, and overtalk it. So then you get an agreement. You believe that I can get X number of cases by Y date. I know you can't guarantee it. There's no guarantees in these things, but you think this is a reasonable expectation. Great. What sort of reporting are we going to use to hold you accountable for those results? So you need some sort of, even if it is a graph with cases over time, and then you need a frequency that you're going to get those updates from that person. And a lot of times you don't want to get too caught up in the weeds with how they're either achieving or not achieving the results, more so than what the results are themselves. So if we get back to the SEO example, if everyone agreed that 10 cases in 6 months is a reasonable expectation, and you are 6 months in the relationship and you have 0 cases, and you say, well, the rankings and the algorithms and the updates, and you didn't give us enough content, yada, yada, yada. Zoom out. You don't care. You hired them to do a job, and the objective of the job was to get you cases, hold them accountable for that, and then decide if the relationship is worth continuing or not based on the results that you're getting, not based on what an account manager or someone that is their job is to keep you happy is telling you. I had a situation a long time ago where we were dealing with a marketing vendor, And the account manager convinced me to stay on another 6 months. We weren't getting the results we wanted. He said, "Oh, don't worry. I put my career on the line for this. Trust me, we're going to make it right." And a week later, the guy took another job at another agency that we had been interviewing before. So it told me okay, his job was to keep me happy, not necessarily to deliver me results. That's also one of the downfalls of going with a big company versus the small person. Small company is you're dealing with the person doing the work. The more removed you get from that, the harder it is to understand what's happening. I found that really works well even with banking relationships. We have a great relationship with a small bank in Round Rock, and that's been amazing. And we've been approached by Chase and Bank of America, and I wouldn't pass on that relationship for anything because of the personal touch we get with them versus someone else.
Yeah, for sure. So identifying the need, evaluating the options, setting expectations, holding accountable. Any other steps in this kind of workflow that we're thinking about?
I would also look at delegating those responsibilities to someone on your team. Even if they're not an expert in it, just have them own doing those steps. Because if you're a lawyer like me, you're busy and you're going to forget to do these things. And make it a checklist. Make it a simple one-pager. Here's what we do when we're hiring a vendor. I want to always talk to 3. I want to get priced before they get to my desk. We're going to have a report. We're going to have evaluation periods. And ask your office manager, hey, you're in charge of this. Whether it's a copy service, a deposition court reporter company, a marketing agency, or anything in between, if you follow those steps, you really don't have to do a whole lot to get great results from these things.
So we've got about 100 employees at the firm. How many vendor relationships would you guess that we have? I'm putting you on the spot.
Oh, man. But I bet we have big and small, at least 100. And if we said key ones, probably 20 to 25, if not more. Yeah. And I look at those similar to how I look if someone worked at the law firm, as an employee. Right. You've seen our organizational chart, and a lot of times I'll put a vendor in as someone on the org chart because I'm holding them accountable for the same results that I would if they worked here.
Yeah. When do you, and you touched on this a little bit, but when do you prefer a vendor versus an employee, and how do you make that distinction?
I think if you're experimenting with something that you're not sure is going to work, a vendor's a great experiment. I think if you don't have the expertise and it's very expensive to get it, a vendor's great. I also think if the employee you're going to need to hire is very difficult to get, and a lot of times, in the examples I think of as accounting, financial, before you came along, a lot of marketing, we needed a lot of vendors for that. Because each individual role is very expensive. And if you went to go try to hire those employees, it would take you several years or a year or more to hire them.
Mm-hmm. And then back to the small versus big for a second. Are there examples of functions that you do want a big organization? Like, say, for example, maybe data entry. So you're not worried about that single person going on vacation. There's a team of people that can keep that turning in the background.
Software, definitely. Don't go small company on software. We have software developers that we develop our own, but if we're going to buy something off the shelf, I want the 800-pound gorilla that's not going anywhere. I want Microsoft. I don't know, is Linux a thing? Whatever that. And so the reason why with software and stuff like that, it's important is you don't want them to disappear and your whole platform is based on it. I remember there was a company called WordPerfect. I don't know if they're still around, but a lot of law firms used them. And then when they went away, people were really out of luck because they had to change to Word and it was a big mess and they stopped updating the stuff. So when it comes to software, I always go a big provider.
Awesome. Any other points you want to hit on regarding how not to get ripped off by vendors?
Be smart, don't be arrogant, and know you're not the expert at everything.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for the time, Jack.
Good talking to you. Good stuff, man.